everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. I'm Mike Farah, and today we have publisher of AHOY Comics, Hart Seely, on the show. He is a journalist by trade. In fact, only just got into comics as a business a few years ago when AHOY started up. And he and Tom Peyer and others put together this company, really trying to set it apart from the other major players in the comic book world. They have a lot of great titles. And we get into all of that, starting a comic company, what their ethos are, what kind of stories they like to tell. But we also get into his career as a journalist. He was also a big admirer and fan of New York sports teams, including the Yankees. Got to meet one of my heroes, the shortstop / announcer, Phil Rizzuto. So we talk about that. And just, a wonderful guy with an interesting background. So let's get to it. This is Hart Seely. To have the publisher of AHOY Comics with us today. His name is Hart Seely. Hart, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're going to start you off with our patented first question, which is, how did you first discover comic books?
Oh, good grief. I think I go way back, way beyond Marvel, all the way to the Wendy, the Good Witch, and Casper the Friendly Ghost, and the Ghostly Trio, and all of those things. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York called Waverly, and there was a newsstand in the downtown sector. The downtown sector was about 4 businesses, and one of them was Harper's Newsstand. And every Tuesday, the comic books came in. Not Wednesday. I mean, it was a different era then, and Waverly was a little at the far end of the world. But I managed to go there and get the latest Casper the Friendly Ghost, or anything that came out of that comic book house. And I would walk all the way down from my house to the downtown sector and then walk all the way back. And like I say, it was either heaven or hell. Nobody's ever figured out which it was. But that was my small town upbringing, and that was my first entrance into comic books. And I was hooked from then. I mean, as everybody, whoever gets into comic books as a kid is always hooked.
Very true. Now, were you a collector from the beginning? Do you have the early issues of Casper?
No,
with you?
I never. No, I wish I knew where those were. I followed the early days of Spider-Man. I followed the Hulk. I mean, when he was first introduced, I was there. I'm an old boomer. I'm an old guy. So you got to understand, I saw all these guys, all of these comic book characters in their infancies, and to some degree, that like hurt me in my comic book life, because as they went on and on and on, I sort of lost touch with many of them, if not most of them, at various times in my life. When Spider-Man takes on the Vulture and wins, there isn't much you can go beyond that in a lot of respects. And I love the early comic books. And then as a result of just being old and bitter and all that stuff, resented some of the places that new comic books were taking my favorites. So I lost touch with a lot of them at different stages. What are you going to do?
It's a sober realization when you understand that these characters are not yours to play with. They go where the writers and editors want them to go, not necessarily where you want them to go.
Yeah, no. As a publisher, I deal with that a lot, although we have such a young raft of characters that it's hard for us to, we just haven't, gone around the circle of the globe a few times with these characters. So we haven't really changed them in any ways of our character, our small character troupe. But yeah, they everybody has partial ownership of Spider-Man, and you know, old coots like myself, they they we have a comic book called The Wrong Earth, which is all about multiple dimensions, different dimensions. And it's one of my favorite comic books in the world. I love it. But, Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse with everybody coming around, as an old school idiot, I find that really distracting. I find that, Peter Parker should be Spider-Man and no one else. But I do understand that, when The Wrong Earth comes out, I'm all for multiple dimensions. So what the heck,
Yeah, it's you can be selective that way, especially when you when you have your own company to explore those environments.
Right. Yeah, I can crush the dreams of all those poor readers who have a love for one particular Wrong Earth character. That's right.
Right. Exactly. So we do want to get into AHOY, but we usually, it's a quick sort of hop, skip, and a jump from the interest in comics to somehow breaking into the industry. But that is not your path. You are more known for your work in journalism and the various publications you've worked on and books and things of that nature. Was journalism sort of early on your passion, the thing that you wanted to do, and you just went out there and did it?
My dad ran the Waverly Sun, the small town weekly in the town where I grew up, and I was always his son. That was it. I was always going to be his son, and the Waverly Sun was a tough business because basically we were in the Rust Belt of upstate New York, and all the industries left at once around 1974, 75, and everything went to hell, and the paper went down the tubes. I was just getting out of college then, and I went into working at radio stations, and from there I hooked on with the Binghamton Press newspaper. And from there, I hooked on to the Syracuse newspaper. And from there, I hooked on to a good woman and never wanted to leave. But so, yeah, I spent my whole life basically as a newspaper reporter. People would say journalist, and I'd say, no, newspaper reporter. That's all, that's what it was. And I sold a few books and made more money from the books than I ever made from newspapers. And that was about it, basically. But I just was a newspaper reporter for all those years, and so I really wasn't. The first time I met Tom Peyer, who is the editor-in-chief of AHOY Comics, was when I was living in Syracuse, and we were sitting drinking at a party, and Peyer told me that Clark Kent was no longer working for a newspaper, but that in the current incarnation of Superman that he was watching, Clark Kent had become a TV news reporter. And that blew my mind. I was absolutely convinced that Peyer was pulling crap on me. And it was from that conversation that we became great friends. And even now we're business partners and partners in crime on AHOY Comics. And Peyer was always a big comic book guy, and he in fact even wrote in a character named Seely, and when he did the Superman comics for a while, and he basically had Superman say, "Beat it, Seely," just for the sake of getting to me. Where was I? Man, you get old and you just sort of dodder around. You just bounce from one thing to another. Stop me, please.
No, you were talking about the reporting and I was reporting and back into the I guess the world of comics via Tom Peyer.
Yep. I was a newspaper reporter, and it was a great life. I did it for about 30 years in all of my newspapers. Um, it was a middle class world, and you got to cover celebrities, and you got to deal with real life issues that needed to be written about, and you got to know a town in a way that I don't think many people ever do. Um, and it's all crashed. I mean, newspaper reporters now, there aren't any. There's nothing. That is gone. That might as well be an elevator operator job. And like I said, I had books on the side, and they sort of helped me. Well, they definitely made money for me, and that was, how we ended up being able to leave relatively early when the time came, when the Newhouse Corporation punched out its entire roster of newspapers, the Syracuse Post-Standard included. And there still is a Syracuse Post-Standard, but is a fragment of what it once was. The idea of a big newsroom with 30 or 40 people, at the time on the phone pecking at their typewriters or their computer screens, that's all gone. That's all gone. And again, I can sound like an old crab complaining about the way things once were, and that probably sums me up.
But if things have not gone the way they had, it sounds like, I don't want to say journalism, but reporting, and even maybe small town or reporting was, in your blood, and something you probably would still be doing, I'd imagine, if things were different. Is that the right way of thinking about it?
There was one guy at the Syracuse Post-Standard who was in his 70s. His name was Joe Ganley. And all he did was come in for about 2 hours in the morning and write his column about lost dogs and lost cats and remembrances of things that were like 100 years ago. And then he left and he played golf. And that's what I aspired to do. That's all I wanted. I was going to be the next Joe Ganley. And I was going to go into my 70s. And because Ganley was always being like chased by all the women of Syracuse, all the elderly women, they considered Ganley to be like the greatest knight in shining armor, especially if they lost a cat, because he would be on the charge. And I figured, that would be the life to lead. Just be the Joe Ganley of a town and hang out with all of your friends and put their names in the paper now and then. That was it. I could have been that old guy, but like I say, they cut the paper down. And that was so be it. Probably a mercy killing. I'm probably the luckiest man that I'm not still at that paper writing about lost cats.
And before Ahoy, you actually, though, and maybe while you were reporting, or maybe this was after, you actually have written some books, including one or more with Tom Pryor. One that struck out at me called "Oh Holy Cow," the selected verse of Phil Rizzuto, who, as growing up a Yankee fan, was just one of my heroes and a voice of my youth that I just love. Can you tell us a little bit about the books you wrote, and especially this one?
Oh Holy Cow! It was a book of bound poetry from the voice of Phil Rizzuto on and during Yankee games. And what we did was transcribe Phil Rizzuto's words during Yankee games, and which he would go off on different tangents. I mean, he would be talking about like the squirrels outside his window, or kids playing in boxes after Christmas Day, anything other than the game itself. The Yankees, by the way, this was in the 90s, and the Yankees were putrid. They're sort of putrid right now, but hopefully that'll change. But we did that, and we had the poet laureate of the United States. I can't think of his name right now. Oh, good grief! Write for the New York Times book review, a review of Oh Holy Cow, and he called us geniuses. He called us geniuses, and we got written up in the everywhere, all the mainstream media. We were written up by Roger Angell in the New Yorker. We were written up everywhere you could imagine. The New York Times, anything, and we were going to appear on WPIX Channel 11 out of New York City during a Yankee game and be interviewed with Phil. It was the second to last homestand of the year that was going to be televised by WPIX. And we went down with the publisher, who sent sort of a lackey with us, and he was constantly terrified that we would say something terrible on the air, because Pyre kept saying he was going to ask Phil what he thought about the Pope's record with perversion of delinquent children, that kind of stuff. Anyway, we went down for a game, and they paid our lodging, and we went with the guy who was sort of there to just keep us in line, get us to the game on time and everything. And we met Phil before the game. He came out. We were outside the stadium, and Phil came and waved to us and said he was looking forward to it in the second inning. And a crowd of people surged towards the fence, and I thought we were going to get crushed by it because of the image of Phil coming out to say hi. Anyway, we went down and sat in our seats. We were behind all the girlfriends of the players. We were in this special little section behind home plate, and all the girlfriends or hookups were talking about like the guys they had last night and who they were dating tonight. It was crazy. Anyway, it started raining, and it just rained and rained and rained. They called the game, and we weren't on the list to be rescheduled, because in the last home game on WPIX, they had a raft of celebrities, actual, A and B level celebrities, as opposed to two guys nobody had ever heard of doing something with Phil that a lot of people probably would not understand. Anyway, so that was my moment in the sun or the rain, I guess, and it was over. I mean, we never got on. That was it. Rained out. I want that on my epitaph. Rained out. I developed a great relationship with Phil over the years. I wrote him letters, and he always responded. And he was a one-of-a-kind person. The fact that he was a great baseball player and a great announcer didn't take away from the fact that he was a legitimate human being. He one time called me because he had been away. He had gone to Florida, and I'd sent him a letter, and he hadn't responded. So he called me, and he said, "I'm at the airport. I just got in, and I saw your letter. I just got home from the airport, and I just wanted you to know I'm sorry I took so long to get back to you." And who does that? Who does that? In this day and age, when we have instant transmissions, if somebody doesn't, somebody ghosts you or something like that, you don't think twice about it. Phil called as soon as he got home to see there was a letter from me that he hadn't answered. That was Phil. I mean, what a guy! I hope if your listeners and viewers, if they missed Phil Rizzuto in his greatest incarnation as a Yankee announcer, there was none like him. There never ever will be either. The world has changed, and they won't allow guys like that. But it's really sad. Anyway, yeah,
They don't make
and that was
them
a
like
great
color.
that launched that book launched my ability to get books read by agents and publishing houses. And until then, I had no luck at all getting anything. I was always sending out proposals and drafts and stuff like that, and they were coming back as fast as I could send them. That was the essence of being a dreamboat freelance writer, you know.
And how did you make a move from being an author now, where you were writing a number of these projects, to then launching a comic book company, which is AHOY Comics, which is what you are currently the publisher of? How did that all gestate and come about?
Well, Newhouse Corporation clobbered the Syracuse Post-Standard. They fired everybody on the staff and announced they were rehiring everyone who they wanted to have. And this got them around all of the severance packages that they had to otherwise bestow. Although I should say they did bestow some generous severance packages, but they basically got out of long-term commitments to long-term employees. And I was sort of lucky in that regard. They I quit rather than stay. They actually offered to hire me back, and they wanted me back. I was really good friends with the people who were making those decisions, and maybe it was that. And it was also, but I saw so many of my friends getting hurt, getting just clobbered. I just knew in my life as a reporter, I made a speech to everybody. I would talk to them about the importance of telling the truth. I would say, there are people in this world who never want to talk with a reporter, and there are people who are just aching to live to talk to a reporter. And when you get a chance to speak to the public, you want to tell the truth. I had this whole list of reasons why someone would talk to a reporter. And this was in the 70s and 80s, when the reporting profession was starting to lose its grasp on America. Nobody was confusing us with Clark Kent. Everything was sort of crashing in terms of media credibility. And but I would make this speech, and I went over. I embedded in the Iraqi War twice with the 10th Mountain Division up in Watertown, and so I saw a war, and all these, and even then I would make all these speeches about how important it was to talk to the media and everything, even to the soldiers and stuff like that. But when Newhouse broke down the newspaper and just converted it into scraps and whatever leftovers, I knew I could never ever make a speech to people to tell them they should talk with me, because I knew I would never ever believe in my heart of hearts that the company that I was working for was going to fight for them. And I shouldn't make this all about like I'm a bitter guy, but it was a real tough time. And newspapers all across the country died. They died in unison, in a big wave. Anyway, so you asked me how I got into comics. So there's about it's about a year after I've been out, and I've had a few pieces published here and there. I've worked on this and I've worked on that, and but I mostly just took an early retirement because I could. And so I'm sitting in a bagel shop with Frank Camuso, who was one of my writing partners, a brilliant political cartoonist. And we just decided, let's start a comic book company and let's pull Pyre in, because Pyre had nothing going at the time. He was out looking around for things, and he was ghosting for prominent writers at the time, and they were paying him, and he was sort of ghosting for them, but it wasn't getting him anywhere. He was certainly getting no benefits, and it was a tough road to hoe. Anyway, so he said, well, what the hell, if you're financing this, then I'll be in. And there we went. And that was about 6 years ago. And here we are. We're still around. I mean, I didn't think we would survive COVID. When we started, I didn't think we'd survive 2 years. And then when COVID hit, I was really worried that we weren't going to survive that. And every year in the small business of being an independent comic book writer, you don't know whether you're going to make it for the next year or what. But we're about to publish the biggest books we've ever published, and maybe we will make it, or maybe we won't. That is the only honest thing I can say. But anyway, you would ask me how we got into it. Well, that's it. We sort of just lapsed into it. Just one day we decided to do it, and if we'd known all the crapola that we were going to have to deal with, we wouldn't have done it. It was just like pure naivety that we could just start a comic book company. That was insane.
I'm curious, why, with your background in reporting, why comic book company was the thing that sort of bubbled up as the enterprise to take on?
Well, there were two options. I wanted to either restart an alternative press in Syracuse. There was a weekly newspaper called the New Times in Syracuse, and it was an alternative press. In its early days, it was a political junkyard dog. And what it had turned into was an entertainment weekly, and more or less just a boutique suburban crowd entertainment weekly. And I was going to do one of the two. I was going to either do take over the New Times, try to do the New Times and run with that, or go into comics. I couldn't do both. And the guy wouldn't sell the New Times because he thought it was going to come back. And he tried, and it just went nowhere because there was just no real interest out there for anything in print they couldn't make a solid business model online, and nobody was going to take it in print. So they fell apart. They crashed and burned a long time ago. And the beauty of comic books is that I don't think they can be entirely replaced online. And I'm the son of an old newspaper guy. I'm the son of an old newsprint guy. I've never seen a comic book that was the same online as it is when you're holding it in your hand. And I don't think they'll ever invent some. I mean, there will always be comic books, and nobody's going to get something that works on your phone, that brings the Hulk or Spider-Man to your life. Is on a little iPad. It's not going to work. I mean, they've tried, and they've for a generation now tried to bring those things to online. But nobody wants to hunch over their screen and look at a comic book. You'll hunch over your screen and watch The Boys on Amazon Prime, but it's not as pleasurable as if you're watching it on a big TV. But you're not going to sit and watch and read the text for The Wrong Earth. It just isn't quite the same. And so I like to have something you hold in your hand and you turn the page, you pop the paper, and and you put it in a pile in your bedroom. Well, anyway, maybe nobody does that, but that was what I used to do.
Oh, I think there are plenty that still do that, but that's an interesting perspective that, print, if you're going to go for print and you know that that is something that is an aspect of what you want to do, then comic books or sequential art or art in any, way is probably how you have to go. Because yes, in the realm of newspapers and magazines even, it's a lot of words, and those can be replicated fairly easily electronically. But the art, to your point, cannot. And so, if you want something tangible, comic book company is the way to go, I'd say. So let me ask about when you went to launch Ahoy. What was the vision for the company? How are you going to kind of launch this brand, for lack of a better term, into what is kind of a crowded marketplace? You have Marvel, DC, now Image as sort of the big three. How do you sort of carve out your niche as a new company?
We were going to be Funny Vertigo. That was it. Funny Vertigo. But we had Stuart Moore and Tom, Frank, and a lot of their friends who just around the periphery of Ahoy. And we thought Funny Vertigo. And that was going to be our motto, except we felt as though a lot of people wouldn't get it. I mean, there would be certainly people who got it. Insiders would know exactly what we were talking about. But there would be others on the outside who wouldn't get it at all. They would say, like, I don't think there's anything funny about Vertigo. So we struggled to find a motto. And finally it was Expect More, which is nice, but it's not the one that would absolutely crackle. It's not Snakes on a Plane or something like that. They're just like, holy cow, Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. Yeah, I got to go to that movie. Those names of something that just absolutely draw everybody in. So we used Expect More. The reason, and our plan of attack, which was really probably pretty stupid, was, and we're still at it though, was that we would supplement all our stories with short stories, fictional short stories. And now, the death of the short story has been discussed prominently by smarter people than myself for 50 years. I mean, tell me a famous short story writer these days. I mean, you're still talking about John Cheever or somebody. You're still going back in time to get to anybody telling short stories. But we felt as though there is a market, there is a place for short stories, and it was not the New Yorker. The New Yorker short stories are short stories nobody can fathom. We were going to write and publish short stories that were like the stories that should be in a comic book. And they didn't mean they had to have vampires and wolfmen and stuff like that, but maybe they would have them, and maybe they aren't literary masterpieces. Although I got to tell you something, there are some great writers out there writing short stories. So here's the thing: every comic book, almost every comic book we do, has two short stories, and we have developed, I think, a stable of writers who write short stories for us. We pay $200 a pop, and then we pay an artist $150 to draw an illustration. And right now, that's good money for a short story writer. I mean, if you go to the New Yorker and get your short story published, yeah, you'll make a lot more. But boy, you better have some ins to get that short story into that comic or into that comic book. But anyway, I honestly believe that Ahoy Comics is right now one of the preeminent publishers of short stories in America. And that is a pronouncement I make with great pride and with great sorrow, because the short story is a great thing. A punchy 900-word short story. People complain all the time to me, oh, you can't, I need more space on this short story. Well, I say to them, listen, when you die, you're going to get one line on your gravestone. And your epitaph is going to be one line. You better get used to cutting, because they're not going to add you an extra character on that granite rock. But we publish short stories, and like I say, there are two things in this world that have gone way too long. One is baseball games, and the other is short stories. And everybody wants to write a mini novel or a novella or something like that, or a short story that runs 20,000 words or something. Well, no. We want it to be one page and 500 words, and we want it to pop at the end. We want the reader to just say, holy cow, I didn't see that coming at the end. Or get a good belly laugh. That works too. And so anyway, that was our plan. We're gonna turn quality comics, and every comic is going to be short story. We're going to have short stories in there, and our motto is expect more.
I mean, that certainly distinguishes you from the competition. I don't think there are many comics that do backup features, backup comics, short backup comics, let alone, short prose stories anymore. And so I think, because of our attention span having shrunk, I think across the board, I think short stories are a really good sort of proving ground for writers that can then, they can easily blow up and do something better. Not only the story that they write, but the writers themselves can, gain their sort of sea legs on a short story and then come up with something that would warrant a full-blown, comic in this case.
Yeah, you want to have a good time in your job. Be the guy who's writing someone to tell them we're buying the first short story they've ever gotten published. I get to do that every now and then. Or anytime I write to tell somebody that we want to publish their short story, you just know they are like born. You know that you just gave them one of the most enjoyable days they're going to have this year, or maybe many years. And it's such a thrill just to be able to write somebody a note saying, hey, we really love this short story, we want to publish it. Is it still available? Then within 10 seconds, your email will pop right up. Yes, it's available. Yeah. And it's a great feeling. And so many times I ask them how they want to be paid. Do we want to do an electronic transfer or what? And they'll go, no, I want a check. I want a check because I'm going to take a copy of it and put it on my wall. So there you go. That's a great feeling. Like I say, there are good and bad things about every job you have, but that's one of the more enjoyable parts of what I do, that by far.
So you're keeping print alive, not only as a comic book company, but as a check writing.
As a check writing machine, yeah. Well, that's.
Go ahead.
No. Well, you see, that's what I am at this point in time. I'm pretty much doing admin. I never realized this was going to happen this way, because when I was a reporter, the last thing in the world I ever did was count hours and all that crapola stuff you have to do, mileage and stuff like that. I just never bothered with it. But now I'm the guy doing the admin, which is all the crapola nobody else wants to do. I'm the one who gets the W-9 forms. I'm the one who does the monthly books. I'm the one who does all that crap, all that stuff. And you can't imagine the diddly crap you have to do to run a publishing business. You know, there's a county in Mississippi that I won't mention it by name, but they have a local tax, and they have a big warehousing industry, and they tax all the stuff in their warehousing industry. And so every year I get a bill from them, and I have to figure out how. If they just sent me a bill for $30 and said, "Here, pay this for the use of your stuff," I would just pay it. But they require AHOY to, and every other company as well, because Diamond does this for the most part, tries to do it. They require everybody to figure out how many copies they're storing in the place at a certain time, and then pay a percentage of this and calculate it all out and everything. And so we thought we were all taken care of, but they contacted a reference agency, a collection agency, because we were a year overdue, even though a Diamond assured us that they had paid everything. And so I just finally just said, you know what, I'm just going to pay this $40 bill. Here you go. You know, like, what am I supposed to do? Am I going to just find all this, you know, and mount an argument that Diamond paid it and it's $40? So anyway, so this is why publishers, everybody hates publishers. This is why they all hate publishers. It's because all we do is whine about like small amounts of money. You know, we're the ones in the collection box, adding up taking the pennies out of the little scoop jar. You know. Anyway.
Well,
that's my.
I was going to ask about your role. You just basically provided the answer, and the question was, you know, what does a publisher do as opposed to an editor? I think more comic fans are familiar with, you know, editors and editor-in-chief positions, but publishers are a little bit more nebulous and maybe more akin to producers on a movie or a TV show. You know, everybody knows what a director does and things like that, but producers are sort of like not sure. So it really is kind of administrative, you know, making things possible for the editor-in-chief and the others to make the comic books and get them out. Is that a fair summary?
Pretty much. That does cover it. I mean, at the end of the day, everything goes through me too. That's the one last thing about it. Generally, I am not the guy who vetoes anything, because we have a really, really close knit group. We have about 8 people. We have 9 people, and we meet every Tuesday for a Zoom call, and we have, I think, sort of a little family. I mean, that's sort of a joke to even suggest, because we're on Zoom and we're all across the country, scattered. I mean, we're not family, but we all do get to know each other, and we all work really well together, and we all, I think, really have a great respect for each other, and that's really nice. So there's a spirit within AHOY, and basically, our whole thing has been two things. One was that we would always publish good comic books. We would never turn out a bad comic. And I know that it's like, you know, easy for me to say this, but I'm very proud of the fact that I don't think we've ever turned out a bad comic. I know I've read clunkers in my life from other companies, but never from AHOY. That's and the second thing was we would never stiff our writers and our artists or force them to grovel to get their money. And we pay promptly, and we try to treat them the way we would like to be treated, and that has helped us a lot with getting writers and artists, and our big mistake was that we didn't have a third prong in all of this, and I think we're trying to do this now. we didn't at the time realize how important it was going to be. The third part of our triad, it was or is now that we're trying to do right by the comic book shops, who basically control our fate. I mean, it's not like we're doing this out of the realm of like charity. It's because they choose which books are going to get read and which books aren't, even more than I do in a lot of respects. But within AHOY, we're trying to do more with comic book shops and try to help them survive, because without them, all that crapola that I said about how great it is to have comic books and you hold them in your hand and you pop the paper and everything like that. Without those comic book shops, it's dead. Target's never going to sell, never going to have a comic book section. Without those comic book shops, those true believers, those people who just really care about comic books, that would be the one thing that would take us down. So, in retrospect, I wish we'd had three prongs to our plan, and the third part would have been the comic book shops. So we're trying that now. We're trying more outreach and trying to just do things with the shops. And I think we're late to the game, but I feel cause for great optimism that we're finally getting around to something we should have done before.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think you're talking about people that are the lifeblood of the industry on the first two that you mentioned, and now the comic book shops. It's all it's a shrunken but not vibrant community, and so you want to make sure you're doing right by everybody that plays a part in that, the entire I don't know, continuum of producing, reading, selling of these stories. To that point, I'm curious because a lot of other smaller publishers have started with licensed books. Things like, I remember Dark Horse when they first started, I think IDW. Was that ever a thought for you guys in terms of just getting a foothold with some licenses before going out with the original material? Or was it always, the vision was always, we want, our original books, even if it may be, more of a struggle at the beginning, this is how we're gonna, make our mark on the industry?
We actually tried to do some licenses, and we found that the amount of money they wanted for them was just way beyond our. We didn't want to. We had a nest egg that we could put into this. We didn't go in blindly to the idea that we were going to have a tough first few years, but we just couldn't be paying like $50,000 to somebody. We felt they had really overpriced themselves into a few different licenses that we wanted. But something, we now are on the verge of our first real licensed operation coming out. We did a license for the Toxic Avenger, and we're coming out with Toxic Avenger this fall, and it's done by a fellow by the name of Matt Bors, who's a two-time Pulitzer finalist as a political cartoonist, and we've managed to come in contact with the two men who developed Troma Entertainment that produced the movie back in the 1980s, Lloyd Kaufman and Michael Hers. And I have to tell you, it has just been an absolute delight working with Troma. Now, you could say, okay, yeah, sure, right, he's going to say that. But I more so than I ever imagined, because I remember watching the Toxic Avenger and with my wife, my then girlfriend, it was just a crazy but wonderful movie. If anybody had told me 40 years later you'd be partnering with the guy who made Toxic Avenger, I would have said, like, wow, that the world is pretty nuts. But anyway, we've connected with Troma, and Lloyd Kaufman is scheduled to be at our panel at the San Diego Comic Con on July 26th. And anyway, it's just been an absolute delight to deal with Troma, and we paid a very fair licensing fee. It was as high as we could go and as low as they would go, and I think they're all we've kept them in the loop on the script, and I think they're really liking the idea of the Toxic Avenger making a comeback, and in comics, I should say, and so yeah, and we are looking around at licensing things. We put it out to some of our writers. What would they like to do a license for? And they came up with some pretty interesting ideas. Everything from licensing the Today Show, comic book, kind of Today Show. Yeah, okay, that works. That could be fun to do. I don't know whether we can afford it, but we'll try. But some others, and I'm tempted to tell you what they are, but I probably shouldn't, because everybody will get mad at me, because you just Seely, you just flap your gums and can't stop. And I would be premature, because we're just sort of working at it. But yeah, licensing is something we've come late to the game too, and we're really hoping that the Toxic Avenger takes off. And like I say, we have an absolutely brilliant writer on this, and I think we sent his proposal to Troma, and I think they recognized they had somebody special, really interested in their favorite comic, their favorite cartoon, or their favorite character, I should say. And so we're keeping our fingers crossed and seeing how it goes.
Yeah, I think Toxic Avenger sounds like a really good fit for AHOY, actually. Now that I've been, getting to what you guys are doing and sort of your philosophy behind the books, it just seems like one of those quirky, with a little bit lighter, but still, in the science fiction-y kind of, not fantasy necessarily, but that kind of realm of a little bit of pulpy kind of stuff. So I think that's a good fit, and I'm sure that's what you look, when you're assessing all these other possible licenses. You want something that fits well with what you guys are doing already.
Well, this hat is actually Matt Bohr has done a book for us called Justice Warriors, and he's coming out with version 2 very soon. And one of his characters is Officer Shit, which is in this futuristic world of mutants and such. And so he sent me this hat, and I couldn't find my AHOY ball cap. I thought I knew where it was, and suddenly I couldn't find it. So I grabbed this one to wear as the commemoration of Officer Shit as one of our main characters. And the thing is, we have a lot of fun at AHOY. I mean, sometimes we just do things because they're fun. There's 2 books, neither one of which has sold much, but one is by Mark Russell called My Bad, and it's funny as hell. It's a takeoff on the superhero world, and it has some of the funniest superheroes. And there's also another guy, Bryce Ingman, writes with him, so it's 2 people. And they have a raft of superheroes. One is called the Chandelier, and he wears a chandelier over his face. And another is Captain Ohio. He's like Captain America, except he's Ohio, and he has a big zero. It's a big O on his hat and in his front, that Captain Ohio. But the character that we love the most is Acid Chimp, excuse me. And Acid Chimp has a super power of always finding barrels of acid that he throws on things and destroys whatever. It's just as dumb can be. So, and the second book is Billionaire Island, also a Mark Russell book. And none of these books has been a breakout hit, but they've been so good that we just wanted to go with them. We just, there's a book that you're having so much fun with that you say, screw it. Somebody sometime is going to research. There's going to be redemption here because of what we're doing is so funny, so right. Anyway, so we put out a book called Acid Chimp versus, in his book, Billionaire Island, there's the thing called Business Dog. And Business Dog is a cigar-chomping bulldog that basically goes to one or two feed bowls and decides the fate of the business world. And so we had a comic book, Acid Chimp versus Business Dog. No dialogue in the entire book. All just sight gags and just hilarious. And that, I think that book sort of just got swallowed up in the ozone. But it's one of the funniest books we ever published. And something, we just had a really good time doing it. Just we all laughed. Laughed. And there are times when you one of the beauties of publishing is that you say every now and then, well, screw it, this may be what I'm remembered for. I'm 72. I'm not going to go on forever. And, at some point, you got to be remembered for something. And maybe it'll be Acid Chimp versus Business Dog. Wouldn't that be a hoot? Who knows? Who knows?
There are worse things to be on your headstone at the end of all things.
Yeah. Listen, I would take it. In a heartbeat. Give me 5 more years and Acid Chimp versus Business Dog, and I'll seal the deal. I'll shake on it right now.
Perfect. One more question before we start to wrap up, which was, on your website, there is a portal for submissions. And you've talked a lot already about kind of the type of material that AHOY has been publishing and, your kind of attitude and personality. But just for those, maybe to bring it to a close, when someone is submitting something, what are you looking for in a submission that, is going to get your attention and possibly become an AHOY either book or short story?
Well, first off, there's got to be a laugh in there. We are still a comic book company that doesn't take itself seriously. And we do take ourselves really seriously, but we always want to have a laugh in there. And a lot of people send really, really dark stories, and they're really well written, and they're real, edgy and such. But there's not a laugh in there, and we tell them, "I'm sorry, that we didn't laugh." So it's got to give us a chuckle. B, it's got to be well written. It's not too much to ask in this world that you write something well. And you don't put things as I'm speaking them now, in terms of, lost, broken sentences and stuff like that. And we want something to happen. We want the characters to be known, and we want them to have something happen to them, and we want the reader to get a surprise if possible. They don't all have to be like pop surprise endings, because a lot of times people do that way too much and it doesn't work at all. But we just like short stories where the rock starts here and ends up here, and maybe it wasn't where they thought the rock would end up, and maybe it wasn't where they wanted the rock to end up, but this is where the rock ends up. And we think that over the years, I think that over the years, the short story in America became something almost unreadable, and that the nuances that were so wonderful in short stories chased away a lot of readers. There's nobody's ever been being compared to O. Henry,
Sure.
and there are great short story writers in this world. George Saunders, for example, who writes at Syracuse University, which is I live in Syracuse, is I guess the preeminent short story writer in the world. Don't hold me to that. I haven't done any research, but we found some really cool short story writers. A lady by the name of Carolyn Lay, a guy by the name of Kirk Vanderbeek, people you've never heard of maybe, but they know how to write a short story. Robert Jeshenek, you see him in a lot of stuff. Oh, good grief. Now I've started naming them, and that was a big mistake because I won't do justice to those who I leave out. But we're proud to publish these people, and they write short, crisp, punchy, funny, and unforgettable short stories. And they get paid $200, and they're happy as clams, I believe. And there you go. You make friends at least that way.
Oh, for sure. So as we wrap up, is there anything without spoiling or getting yourself into trouble that you can say for the future of AHOY in terms of projects? You already mentioned Toxic Avenger, of course, and some of the books that you've worked on before will be getting new storylines and things like that. Anything else we can look forward to that you can talk about?
Yes, we have the biggest book we've ever published, I think, coming out, and it's Babs by Garth Ennis. And it's coming out this fall, and it's sort of a Sheena of the Jungle meets medieval, dragon lady, and funny all at once. It's a very funny send-up of a bunch of different genres. And it's by a guy who is coming off of, the creation of The Boys, which is the satire of comic book superheroes that every single writer in this world wanted to do and never did. It's the, I believe someone told me it's the biggest, most watched superhero, the most streamed superhero television show in history. And the reason why they would say that is because basically all the Superman and Spider-Man and stuff came before streaming, but nonetheless, you get to say it because it's the way it works. But anyway, that's coming out, and we have really high hopes for it. The numbers are looking good at the outset. And we think with a little luck, that might be a bona fide hit, something that we sort of had one other hit was by Mark Russell, Second Coming, but that was clobbered by COVID. It came out just around the time COVID knocked everything around. I mean, Diamond closed its shop, ceased to exist for a while, and we lost a lot by COVID, but we came out of it, and here we are. But we have high hopes between Toxic Avenger and Babs. We have some of the highest hopes we've had in a long time for sales, but I don't think we're going to throw overboard the quality. I think we want to be known for both. But it would be nice to have a hit.
That was an interesting one, right? Sorry about, you probably couldn't hear my voice as well as you usually do. Probably some technical snafus there on my part. But I love talking to Hart. He has some interesting things to say as someone coming into comics from outside the medium. And I love his passion for storytelling, whether it was his, initial journalism and broadcasting and things like that, reporting, or what he's doing now at AHOY Comics. So please check out AHOY. They have such a great line of comics, and we really think you're going to enjoy them. But that'll do it for this episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for viewing. If you're on YouTube, remember to rate, review, and subscribe, and we'll see you next issue.